You are listening to the Enormocast.
Hanging out with the family over the holidays reminded me that, in fact, there are people out there who think about more than just climbing. Some even think that climbing is ridiculous. Though watching large men kicking and throwing a ball and trying to hurt one another is a completely reasonable use of your time. Go figure. But just in case non-climbing activities have invaded your psyche, but you still want to do, not just watch, remember that in addition to making the best rock climbing, ice climbing, and mountaineering boots on the planet, Sportiva also designs the fastest uphill ski gear around. We're talking cyborg-level tech on skis and boots. And then there's Sportiva's trail runners, mid-weight alpine boots, and hiking boots for the long approach to nowhere that suddenly seems like a good idea in the dark winter months when the balmy rock is unavailable, but lots of delicious sweets are. So whether you're dreaming about climbing or just trying to go nowhere fast, think of Sportiva for all your mountain pursuits. Go to Sportiva.com or your local shop to drink in the possibilities. And hey, the redesigned TC Pro is over there too. Did you know that those two little lines on the cuff are the Dawnwall and Freerider topos? So adorable.
Greetings. This is a message from Dr. Alan Honlove of the Good Catch Institute. The weather is getting colder, and you're still desperately one-hanging your fall project. Or maybe you've decided to do something easier but more miserable, like ice climbing. Isn't it time to renew your commitment to your belayer with something more than an occasional high five? Good Catch is here to help you reinvigorate the foundation of what brought you and your belayer together in the first place. Our expert staff here at Good Catch suggests that you create a safe, warm space for your belayer with the belay parka and stance belay pants combo from our friends at Black Diamond Equipment. The BD belay parka features 2 layers of insulation, a 2-way zipper for wrapping that belay device, and huge internal pockets where your belayer can keep your shoes warm for your next go. The stance belay pants bring the heat with side zips to get in and out even with crampons on. Being wrapped in the BD belay parka and stance belay pants create the feeling of a warm hug from a trusted loved one without the actual human touch that might, give your belayer the wrong idea. But nothing says,
Dude, I'm just going to try this part one more time,
like some bomber insulated outerwear from Black Diamond Equipment. Check it all out at blackdiamondequipment.com or your favorite local shop. And remember, if you are cold, they're freezing their ass off.
We gotta get Listen, where are you playing in town? Are you playing here?
We're doing the Enormo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
a
big
house.
place,
sold
that
it
side
out.
of town. That's a big
nice.
place. You sold it out.
20,000 seats.
You
really should.
The hell are you doing?
I couldn't sleep. I'm checking the ropes. There was a frayed end on your rope, and I'm cutting it out.
Bad weather. No, later, anytime.
Today's show is brought to you by Black Diamond Equipment, with support from Maxim Ropes
and the fine folks at La Sportiva. And don't forget our charter sponsor, Bonfire Coffee. Go to bonfirecoffee.com and enter Enorma at checkout for a discount on great coffee and to support the Enormocast.
And now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Enormocast. This is your host, Chris Kalous. It is about 10 o'clock on January 3rd, 2022. And this is episode 233 of the Enormocast, a conversation with Bradley Chum Carter, better known as Chum, musician, journeyman climber, and a friend of mine, which is kind of strange because we had never met until we sat down to do this interview. At least we'd never met in person, and yet I considered him a friend and still do. We had communicated for years via emails, texts, Instagram messaging, that kind of thing. Maybe that's a feel-good story, the internet, getting to be friends over the internet before we ever met. But guess what happened last month? And I didn't even notice until someone emailed me. Thank you for that email to remind me that the Enormocast hit its 10th anniversary last month. I started this thing. I believe I posted the very first episode on December 11th, 2011, or December 12th, December 13th, somewhere around there during 2011. So that was 10 years ago last month. And I forgot all about it until someone sent me an email and congratulated me on 10 years of the Enormocast, which is pretty wild. I've put out 2 of these things a month almost for 10 years. I think I'm like 6 off that pace after 10 years. Wow, when you put it that way, it makes me tired. Anyway, thanks for listening for all this time. Maybe some of you that tuned in December of 2011 are still listening. I hope so. Or at least you're occasionally dropping in. I mean, who listens to every single one? I am celebrating by having a michelada that I made in my kitchen, a midwinter michelada. Are you guys into micheladas? The sort of tomato and beer concoction, Mexican style. I love them. I can't get enough of them. I know a lot of people are turned off by the clam juice, the clamato, having clam juice. Where the clam juice comes from is something you don't really want to do a mental picture of. I always think it's like dudes just squeezing them and like the juice drips out of their hands into a vat. That's what I like to think. I don't know where the juice comes from. I'm sure it's some large clam juicing machine. Anyhow, there's clam juice in there, but I love them. I can't get enough of them. I'm working on my own recipe. I'm trying different things. A lot of lime juice, a lot of vitamin C in there. So I think it's a good midwinter drink. Tomato juice, vitamin C, and not even that much beer, actually. When you get it all in the cup, you actually put, I don't know, probably like a half a beer in for a pint. So anyhow, micheladas, 10th anniversary. Thanks for being here. Some of you for 10 years, some of you showing up recently, maybe going back and hitting the back catalog. It's sort of a podcast thing to keep your numbers under wraps. You don't bray on about how many people are and in most cases are not listening to your podcast. But I'll just drop this right here. We've almost hit 8.5 million total downloads. Actually, we probably have hit it because I didn't have the statistics going for the first year. So those were probably, I don't know how many I did the first year, but anyway, we're right there. I mean, those numbers are like a day in the life of the Fear Factor guy there down in Texas. But for a niche little podcast, a niche little climbing podcast, not a Nietzsche podcast, a Nietzsche podcast would be an entirely different thing. I'd be on that podcast. I'd go on the Nietzsche podcast. But anyway, my niche podcast, I think it's pretty cool. And imagine if I had $1 for every one of those. It's easy to do the math. I'd have $8.5 million. Except I probably would have stopped doing it at about, I don't know, couple $100,000. At least at $1 million. I'd have been like, all right, I got my $1 million. Fuck this shit. I'm out. So maybe it's a good thing. I've had to scrap for every penny. Anyhow, thanks again for the support, for checking it out, for listening, for continuing to listen. The numbers are great. And it's kind of wild. I mean, I didn't think that would happen when I first put the mics on and talked to Lisa Hathaway about doing a podcast. What's a podcast? Well, you'll find out in a few years, but let's just do it anyway. Cheers. Salty, delicious, clammy. Okay, on today's show, we've got sort of a nice sit down, a nice chat today with Bradley Chum Carter, and he's known to all of his friends as Chum. He is a musician, a very impressive musician, and what I've done with this podcast is I've very liberally sprinkled a bunch of his music through the episode, kind of, I don't know, NPR style. I just kind of impromptu little sections of music here and there. I hope I wasn't overindulgent with that, but I put a lot in because he's got so many different styles of music. Chum is a multi-instrumentalist on stringed instruments. I believe he plays a little trumpet too. I don't know if he picks that thing up much anymore, but he plays all different styles of music as well, from mainly maybe old time and bluegrass is kind of his deep love, but plays rock and roll, plays classical, does a lot of things. And the interesting thing about Chum, and he sets me straight in the interview, is that he started playing in earnest quite late in life, in his 30s, which I've always found is a very big barrier. It's a big barrier for adults who have lives and maybe families and careers and jobs and things to pick up an instrument and master it. And though Chum will blush when I say he's mastered any of this, because any musician, maybe short of Yo-Yo Ma will say they're still working on it, But when you hear his music, you're going to be pretty impressed. And he started late in life, and I think that life throws a lot of curves that don't allow you to practice the way you could when you're a kid, or as I was a teenager playing guitar, and just being able to sit in your room and play for hours and hours because you don't have a job and someone gives you your food and takes care of you. So anyway, that was kind of the impetus for finally sitting down, because I've been following Chum's music. He's contributed to the Run Out. He's contributed to all sorts of climbing movies, which we get into here. But he's also, an excellent climber, and spent, a solid decade and a half just pursuing climbing. And though he was never a famous climber, he's a solid climber. Spent some time on SAR, climbed all over the country, was an early Hueco guy, was a very early guy in Tennessee, so we get some Southeast love here in this episode, but also still a little bit of an everyman. But it was also just a fun chat. We are about the same age, and so we get in a little bit of that, and a little bit of what climbing means to us, and also how the music fits in and actually doesn't fit in with climbing, which I think we've talked about on here before. But as you guys know, I'm a musician, or actually I like to say I'm a player, because I can play the guitar, I can play the bass. I don't really know that much about the musical side of it, but it's always fun to talk to someone who actually does, and I'm always impressed and in awe, and I think you will be too when you guys hear some of the cuts I put into the episode here. So with that said, happy anniversary to me. Enjoy this interview with Bradley Carter. And if you want to find out more about his music, I will try to put links on the website post to at least the tracks that I played here. They're all over the place in Apple Music, in Spotify, on Bandcamp, on YouTube. But if you go to Spotify, is a good place to start. He's under Chum-DM3. He's also over at YouTube on Chum-DM3. And there's a lot of stuff over there to get you started. Thanks again for sticking with me for 10 years, or even just showing up for this episode with Bradley Chum Carter.
Syndrome because of the level of climbers that you get on here, but
yeah, but I've had a bunch of chumps on too, so
but no chums yet.
No chums. I don't know, there's just another angle, and that's what we're here for. I mean, you know how I roll. It's like, it's not just about talking about how hard everybody climbs.
Sure.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's a cool place to start, but why don't you pick up what you just said? You were like,
talking about chess?
Yeah, I learned to play chess in Hueco.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so did you ever go to Hueco?
No, I've never been.
Oh, man.
I know.
Well, for starters, you and I have been climbing exactly the same amount of time, right?
Really?
I started in 91.
Okay.
And you did too, I think.
Well, 89, actually.
Oh, you got me.
I got you a little bit.
Dang it.
Yeah. August, literally, I know it was August of 1989.
Okay.
Was the very first time I climbed, because it was the very first day I got to the dorms in Colorado State. So.
Right. Well, that was the first place that I actually did climb. Was the Tropics. Mm-hmm. Remember the Tropics?
Yeah, of course.
It's gone now.
Yeah, it got buried, yeah.
Yeah. That was the first place I ever went climbing. Yeah, so I feel like I was really lucky that I got to experience Hueco before the popularity or the closure that happened. I guess it was 98. They laid down these sort of draconian bans. I mean, they might have banned climbing entirely. I can't remember exactly.
God, was it that long ago?
It was 98, yeah. Because my last season there was 97. Used to go down there, just spend the winter. Should I get her off?
No, I don't care.
Okay. Our cat is threatening
the whole system. Yeah, that's okay.
Threatening to hit pause. Anyway, so to like kill time at night, there's nothing to do in the dead of winter in the desert down there, and we would play chess. Nobody knew what the hell they were doing. Nobody knew how to play. I remember I played somebody who actually kind of knew what they were doing, and they just would obliterate you immediately, because if you don't know the basics of chess, then you're just going to lose right away to somebody who knows even the most basic stuff. They're going to kill you. And ever since that time, I've always been curious about it, and I never got into it until the last year. But it wasn't the Queen's Gambit, I got to say. I mean, I did like it, but I got into it because I got sick this year, so it was good to like kill time.
So when you're like into it, what's going on? You playing online? Are you?
Oh man!
Are you like reading books? Are you figuring out defenses? Are you?
Well, like chess kind of blew up this last year because of one, the pandemic, and also the Queen's Gambit. So between those two things, chess just exploded. I don't know if you're familiar with Twitch. Do you know what Twitch is? Mm-hmm. So like Twitch is most popular game is chess, I think. And I think it's because of the pandemic. And so there's all these streamers that produce content on Twitch, and then they like upload it onto YouTube. And a lot of it's educational. Mm-hmm. So some of it's really awesome too, like entertaining and super helpful. Yeah, so I just dug into all that. So studying openings, studying tactics, studying in-game stuff. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's hard. Right. Chess is hard. I would say I'm like at a 5.7 level.
Right.
My rating on chess.com is like 900 for rapid, which is like 5.7. So like Magnus Carlsen, who's like the world champion, he's rated like 2,800, 2,900, which is like obviously 5.15. Mm-hmm. So as you get higher, it gets harder. Super. He's like Adam Onder or somebody. He's phenomenal.
Is there personalities in chess like that?
Oh yeah, that's one of the reasons that it's kind of hooked me too. The subculture is crazy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's crazy. It's fun. I enjoy it, but I kind of suck. Yeah, it's frustrating.
Well, I mean, it's like anything, learning, something later in life. It's like, I mean, even learning to play an instrument. I know so many people that struggle, like I'm going to learn how to play guitar, and they're like 40 something or whatever, and
yeah, it's hard.
You just struggle because life is busy, and learning. I'm just lucky, speaking of like being fortunate, that I learned how to play when I was a teenager, and I was like, I could sit in my room for 5 hours.
How to play guitar?
Yeah, how to play guitar, not chess. No,
yeah, but I actually didn't start guitar till I was 30.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, 29.
Were you a musician otherwise?
I mean, I was a hack.
Okay.
Like I could play some Dave Matthews licks.
Nice.
I guess it's kind of embarrassing to say that publicly.
No,
but
fine.
Dave Matthews' music has not aged well, I don't think. I'm not sure. He almost ran me over when I lived in Seattle.
Really?
Yes. We lived in the same neighborhood, and one time I was riding my bicycle through an intersection, and I came around a car that was trying to turn left, and I just like quickly just went around this car, and a car was turning left and didn't see me. It was, turning left across traffic.
Right.
And that car almost hit me, and I was really close to the driver, and I looked, as I was almost getting hit, and it was Dave Matthews. And he just had like the most like, what the hell are you doing look on his face.
Was it famous Dave Matthews or pre-famous Dave Matthews?
Yeah, he was definitely famous.
Oh man, it could have worked out really good to get hit by him.
Yeah.
Do you need a new fiddle player, Mr. Matthews?
Yeah, right.
So you didn't learn how to play until later in life. So you're the exception to my rule.
Well, I've had a lot of luck when it comes to amount of practice time. A lot adults just wouldn't have had the practice time that I've had. So.
Oh yeah, why is that?
I'm pointing to my wife who supported me. Yeah, she definitely. She provided a lot of support to let me practice as much as I have. So.
So why'd you get into that?
Oh, man. We got to go back, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I started climbing when I was 19, and I thought climbing was it, you know. I thought, this is it.
Right.
This is all I'm doing.
Right.
This is the rest of my life. And it was, basically, until 34. But the whole time I was climbing, you know, like there was always this nagging feeling that I should be doing something else. Being creative, you know, like when I was climbing, I would try to write stories about climbing, but I was not very good at it. And I just didn't have another creative outlet. And so until music came along, I didn't have that outlet. Then once music came along, I was like, oh, okay, this is the outlet that I've been looking for.
Right. So what did your climbing, so you're talking about like a dedicated, sounds like decade at least.
Oh yeah, very
to
fully.
Like full on road life, full on. You were on SAR, is that right?
Full on, yeah. I
So
mean, I started, you know, around the same time you did, and I don't know if you started for the same reason that I did, but the counterculture of climbing back then was a lot stronger. Maybe is that the right word?
Yeah,
I don't know.
for sure.
Like it was so. Like, it was just weird to say, I'm going to be a rock climber in 1991.
Yeah.
Especially in Tennessee. Like, there just weren't that many people doing it. And I started climbing in Knoxville. And, geez, I mean, Chattanooga had probably, like, a fair number of climbers. But Knoxville was, like, a total backwater for climbing. It was just developing there. And so, oh, geez, I mean, you know, to say, yeah, I'm a rock climber. People just like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, what does that mean? I mean, it alienated me from my family, right? You know, like they didn't get it.
Right.
Nobody in my family got it. They're just like, what? What are you doing? I mean, it's totally mainstream now, but I think a lot of people are probably climbing these days to sort of have that alternate path outside of the capitalist machine that we're stuck in. And, you know, I recognized that right away back then. And, you know, reading the stories from John Long and Chris Jones and Chouinard and whoever else, Royal Robbins, you know, you read those stories and you're just hooked, you know, like I want that.
Yeah.
I want that alternate lifestyle, you know.
Well, it's interesting because you look at the Southeast and I think we're talking about the 90s, 80s, 90s, things like that. And we're sitting in Boulder now. And so we're here among the mountains and we're here where a lot of that lore was,
totally
was invented, right?
I never thought I'd live in Boulder, but yeah.
And so like whatever was going on climbing wise in the Southeast, you know, it was going on and there's going to be people like, oh yeah, there's, you know, these crags people have been climbing, but it was super deep inside subculture climbing because the deal is that if it was in 90, 91, you know, sport climbing hadn't arrived.
No.
It hadn't arrived almost at all anywhere in the States.
It just started when I started.
Yeah.
Glenn Ritter basically single-handedly brought sport climbing to Tennessee. I mean, like Jerry, I guess there were some, at least to Knoxville.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. Like it was just getting going.
Yeah. So I mean, all these places that seem like they've been there forever in the Southeast none of that was there, and it wasn't even being conceived of because you can't. You know, the cracks certainly in the red, some of them had probably even been climbed by then. But, you know, they're few and far between. And all those faces in between, like people weren't even considering climbing stuff that was that steep without any places to put gear, you know?
Totally. Well, when I started in Knoxville, Obed hadn't been discovered. Have you ever been to Obed?
Mm-mm.
Well, Obed is like the biggest climbing area to Knoxville, I think, and certainly the best. It's not the closest, but it's the best. And it hadn't, or rediscovered, I should say. Some old timers put up some routes in like the 70s or 80s, but like just a couple trad routes. Like it hadn't really been developed. And then Glenn Ritter, Tony Robinson kind of rediscovered it on a paddling trip, and their minds were blown. And Glenn was trying to sort of follow Doug Reed's lead in bringing sport climbing to Tennessee. Mm-hmm. Doug Reed was bolting, the New River Gorge, Little River Gorge. And so Glenn wanted to do the same thing at Obed. So he kind of like single-handedly like dragged East Tennessee climbing into existence, really. He built a climbing wall at the University of Tennessee. Yeah, he did so much for climbing around East Tennessee. And I think you could count on like two hands the number of climbers in East Tennessee in 1991. There just was not many people.
Right, yeah.
So it felt cool to be part of such a small, tiny little clique, and like we're doing this weird, totally unique thing, going to really remote places. Like in 1991, to go to Obed, oh my gosh, it was like going back in time 30 years.
Sure.
Because it was just so undeveloped. It's still, to this day, very undeveloped, but back then, I mean, you were really going back there.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of pride, I think, like coming up in such a small little clique of climbing, such a small subset of a subset. I had a lot of pride, as like a Knoxville Obed climber, you know, and then to go out and climb at other areas, to go to T-Wall was a big deal. Then to go to North Carolina was an even bigger deal. And then to go to the New was a bigger deal. And then finally, my first, I think within a year, I took a road trip to Colorado, and we climbed the Petit Grépon and Hallett Peak and nearly died on both of them. Got benighted on the Petit Grépon, froze. I was wearing cotton. We started climbing at noon. We had no idea what we were doing. Totally lucky. And my partner at the time was a guy named John Seitz. Do you know John Seitz?
No, I don't.
He lives in Silverton, Colorado now. And he's lived there for, I guess, 25 years. He's been living in Colorado a long time, but he was my main climbing partner for like the first 5 years that I started. And he was just down for adventure, so he kind of like was always pushing us. Yeah, this will be an amazing adventure. And so when we started, adventure was first and athleticism was second. And we definitely partied a lot too. So it was the whole, just like wild counterculture side of climbing was what we were after at first.
Yeah, I mean, that's that's just really all it was. That's all climbing was. Because without sport climbing and, and then bouldering was still this thing that you did mostly as something, just because you couldn't go climbing. It had come up. I mean, there was definitely like Horsetooth was there, and John Gill had made his mark, and there was Sherman was around, and there was things going on in Hueco, but it wasn't in the full-on zeitgeist the way it is now. And even in Fort Collins, where that's all there kind of is in town, there was still this idea that, come this weekend, we're going to go to Boulder and we're going to climb on ropes, So it's an interesting thing, the athleticism part of it, and again, we can look at Gill. Gill was, into that athleticism part of it, but he was a bit of an anomaly forever in so many different ways.
He was, I mean, even to this day, I feel like John Gill's approach, there's nobody who has it, right? Because he would see bouldering as a gymnastic routine that you perfected over and over. Mm-hmm. So you wanted it to be easier and easier. So that, I mean, he was also into training, obviously, but he was into that like flow state of just like, I'm going to do this boulder album 10 times and make it better each time, for its own sake.
Right.
That was the art,
right.
Not the number, the flow state, the perfection was the art.
So why did you climb at Tropics the first time? How did that circumstance?
That started,
and again, Tropics is part of old Horsetooth Reservoir bouldering.
It was basically one traverse, right?
Yeah, well, there was a few problems. There was that
Mega
nose
traverse
thing that you had to, and I always remember that one because my friend JT just like fell on his back, like right, and we didn't use. I mean, it was pre-pads, so
Sure.
yeah, and we just like all stood around and looked at him while he rolled around in the cobbles, and it was all the landings were the cobbles, like those river rocks, like.
Yeah,
like
man, it's
rounded,
been a long time. I don't remember.
I totally
very well.
remember, but then they buried it because they made the dam bigger, so it disappeared. But
Well, the Mega Traverse was like the big.
Yeah, the Traverse,
sin.
yeah.
Well, one of my best friends in high school, his name was Ben Demler. He was ahead of the curve in so many ways. I'm really lucky that I got to know this guy. I mean, I grew up with him, went to kindergarten with him all the way through high school. He was one of my best friends, but he was a bike racer, and he was one of the best junior bike racers in the country in the 80s. He was going to go pro, and so he moved to CSU to pursue cycling. And so, I just came out to visit him, and he was like, let's go do this rock climbing. He got into bouldering, and he was such a good athlete. I mean, I think he sent the Mega Traverse like the day that we went out there, he couldn't have been climbing more than a year or something. I mean, what was it, like V6 or 7? I don't know.
I don't recall.
But anyway, he was my friend, and I came out to visit him, and we climbed there, and he took me over to Telluride, and I was just like, whoa.
So that's when you climbed for the first time.
That was my first time, but I didn't really get into it until this guy John Seitz was like, "Hey, Chum, we need to go rock climbing," and he had discovered that there was climbing around East Tennessee. I didn't know that there was climbing around there, and so we were on the rowing team together at the University of Tennessee, and so it was like something that we did in the summer, at first, like between rowing season, and all it took was one summer of climbing around East Tennessee, just like podunk crags, small little crags, and we were totally hooked. And then, of course, I went down the rabbit hole, got a climbing magazine, and you start reading about the culture. But we were also lucky in that Knoxville had a limestone cliff right in town. It's now closed. It's called Cherokee Bluff. But Glenn Ritter mostly bolted this crag, and it was right in town. Really good limestone. It was super quality. And hard, like roots from 5.7 to 5.13. And so we could go there and just, push ourselves and learn how to rock climb, right after class or whatever. And it was just right in town. So Knoxville it was a good time to start climbing.
So I'm trying to get a picture of what these years looked like.
Yeah, I thought I was going to be working movies. I got a degree in theater, technical theater, and I thought that I wanted to go to Hollywood and all this stuff. And, as soon as I started climbing, it was very hard to graduate. I mean, that's all I wanted to do. I was just climbing any free moment, going to the gym, going to Cherokee Bluff, taking weekend trips to Buzzard Point, or once Obed was discovered, then we were just always at Obed, every free day, getting pummeled by the steep roofs there and getting scared. Then once we learned that there are multi-pitch routes in North Carolina, just 4 hours away, then, we were getting over there as much as possible. The South is, I think, the best quality rock in the country, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I got into an argument with a kid in Boulder Canyon a month ago or something, and
right.
I was like, he had just moved out here from Virginia or something,
right?
And I was like, yeah, Boulder Canyon's awesome. There's a lot of good routes, but I think I still think the best rock is in the South. He's like, what? No way. I was like, no, I don't know, man. I think the best rock is in the South.
Yeah, I mean, it's size. Size is kind of our thing out here in the West anyway. I mean, if you're arguing about Boulder Canyon, then yeah, that kid
I
lost.
was also just kind of,
He lost
goosing
that
this
argument.
kid.
Yeah, well, he's going to lose that argument anyway. I mean, Boulder Canyon's decent, but it's like certainly not like our gem go-to.
Castle Rock's good, though.
Yeah, it's all flary and slimy, but hey. Well, I'm trying to like imagine this like cultural thing that you guys have going, because again, it was like this really isolated. I mean, climbing communities were fairly isolated, and
the Knoxville community in the early 90s was very isolated.
Yeah, I mean, I was just last night actually talking about of all places, Paducah, Kentucky.
Yeah,
and
that's like East or Western Kentucky.
Yeah, Western Kentucky, but it's not far from Jackson Falls, which is in Illinois, right? Yeah. But I was telling this story about how I came out here to Colorado and learned to climb and had been climbing a couple years or maybe just a year or two, and I went back and I was like, would have been 89, 90. And I was like, you know what? I've heard that there's climbing in Southern Illinois. Right. And I'm coming from Colorado and I'm like, I get my buddy from Chicago and I'm like, let's go down there. Let's like go check it out. And basically I was like, yeah, we'll go down there. We'll find like a shop. There'll be somebody who knows like about climbing and we'll get like a guidebook. Cause I'm coming from Colorado. Right. And already in the 90s. And that's what I'm saying. It's like fully established. Like climbing is this thing that's been there for 50 years. It's like the Stetners and the Robert Orms and all these people. It's like a century of climbing legacy. And that's what I expected to find in Southern Illinois. So we literally went down there and I went to, a couple like sports stores around like Carbondale. And I was like, yeah, they're climbing. And they just were like, what are you talking about? So then we just took literally to crisscrossing the area looking for cliffs. Like, these perfectly...
What year was this?
This would have been 1990.
Oh, yeah.
Probably.
Man.
And so, like, all the roads are, like, perfectly squared off around farms. So we're, like, essentially, like, perfectly grid searching the entire southern part of Illinois. I had never heard of Jackson Falls. Maybe it was kind of there or maybe it wasn't there yet. I have no idea. But we would, like, stop the car and then... like clandestinely cross fields.
Did you find it?
We found cliffs worth climbing. We went to this place called Giant City, which I know has climbing. Maybe it's closed. I don't know. It was in a state park. I found chalk. I mean, this is how like the investigation was going, was like, I talked to a ranger there and they told me something about maybe some climbing and we found this little bouldering wall and I found chalk and I was just like, yes. And then we ran into some guys who rappelled, and they didn't know anything about it. And then
that's amazing. You were so dedicated.
Well, and we went. I mean, we'd gone down there, and so I was like, and then we went to a cliff, and I went up there and I set up this top rope, and we rappelled down. It was all covered in cobwebs, but then I found a piton, and I was like, we have climbing. And to this day, I have no idea what. I'm sure it's like a developed cliff now. And I don't know, but we were like, I knew better than to like advertise that we were crossing farmers' fields, but we totally were. I was just parking my van on the road and we were just like wading through corn.
Totally.
But yeah, it's just like interesting because I expected this one thing because I was in Colorado, like at least somebody to know something about climbing, but it was not.
You couldn't have picked a more off the radar location than Southern Illinois in the early 90s.
Yeah, totally. I know. And then a few years later, I went back to Jackson Falls and found it. And but even then, we had to sort of explore. But it's just kind of, it's like it's so.
I kind of miss those days.
Yeah,
right?
totally. No, I mean,
totally missed that.
That's what I'm pointing out. Is like it's kind of hard to even remember that it was like that.
Yeah, I miss that.
Yeah.
I think that I don't want to be the old fart guy that just like bashes everything new. So that's not where this is coming from. But I would say that this generation that's coming up now, unless you're really into exploring, like going out and finding off the beaten path stuff, you're not getting as rich in it as an experience as I feel like I had. Mm-hmm. Like there was a magic to like getting a hand-drawn topo to some crag in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
and going there with your buddies and like having you find it and like discover the climbing on your own, as opposed to going on mountain project and being led there by GPS, like I'd miss it, but I also feel, glad that I got to experience that aspect of climbing, for as long as I did. Mostly gone in North America, I think.
I mean, that was like de jour. That's what happened. That's
how
how you
how
climbed.
It was, totally. And you would hear stories, right, of like for years I heard about Little River Canyon. Mm-hmm. It was a mysterious place. Nobody would give up the beta to Little River Canyon because there was a road that snaked along the top of it and there was no parking. So they were worried about parking. So to get into Little River Canyon for a long time, you had to go there with somebody who knew. But when you finally went and saw it, for the first time, like that was a magical thing, a special thing.
The counterculture thing that you're talking about, that's also a little bit of this old guy lament because, here we are where it's like fully mainstream. And like you could definitely go to Southern Illinois and find a place that knew about all the climbing. And besides going on Mountain Project and everything else, actually, that reminds me, I probably should go on Mountain Project and see if I can like match the shit on there with these things that we were driving around looking at. But yeah, I mean, and again, it's hard to not turn it into this lament because we're old guys, and that's and I work really hard to not have that. But part of my brain is like, the more mainstream it becomes, the more lame it becomes. And like
that's a controversial statement.
Yeah, I mean that's not. I mean it's like that's.
But I
totally
mean, when
like,
you go out and you climb, it still feels good. Everything's
right.
the same.
Right.
The feeling is mostly the same.
Right.
Like
the actual the
But
climbing.
this is just one aspect that I'm talking about, right? That's kind of gone and that I miss.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, but it also attracted me, like the fact that you were a weirdo and you had these few people that knew about climbing, and it was like your secret subculture.
Absolutely.
Was super appealing.
Absolutely. I loved it. I still love it. I still love that about climbing, even though it's more mainstream. I still love that, if you were to roll into most any climber campground, you immediately have something in common with these people.
Right.
It is, I feel like people are a little more closed off these days because so many more people do climb, but in general, I still feel that camaraderie.
On from the lament.
Yeah, sorry.
But it's more a historical picture of like, an era and a time when it's hard to, like I said, it's hard for me to remember it. Because,
it's been a while.
The change is gradual and it just seems like, we've always had this phone where you can look up information. We've always, and I think we've talked about it on here before, but there was even a push against phone, like you weren't supposed to bring your phone with you at all into the mountains. I remember even guiding, like talking about it, like, and then all of a sudden it just occurred to everybody that, it's safer to bring your phone. But, this idea of disconnecting was super important to the whole part of it as well. I mean, Alpinist is a, like that's out right now, and that's kind of was his attitude.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, yeah.
Man, that movie was
it's kind of like
else.
a weird ideal.
I just watched that movie.
Oh, yeah.
What did you think about it? Did you like it?
Yeah, I mean,
I
think the soloing footage in there is.
I thought it was more gripping than free solo.
Absolutely.
I thought. Watching him solo that mixed route to that thin pillar of ice. I was like, what the hell?
Yeah, totally. No, that shit. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, in both cases, you're watching this footage of something that you intellectually know they survived.
Yeah, but it's still hard.
And I think like the suspension of disbelief was sort of more powerful with Marc-Andre than with Honnold, because you just have this like, we've just been trained to believe that Honnold has it all fucking under control. Do you know what I mean?
I know
he's a machine. He's a computer.
He unlikely that he'll ever fall off.
Yeah, it's just like we've been trained to believe that his brain is like this crazy computer that's making all the calculations that we can't conceive of, and it's all going to be fine. I did not get. I mean, maybe it was the film. Maybe it's what I know about Marc-Andre. I never met him, but I know people who knew him. He seems more like the wild card dude, and so it's like, and it's all just like how they're presented, I think, in a lot of ways.
Well,
but I just feel like for some reason I feel like
Whitaker describes as old school hippie bold. You know what I mean? Like he had that old school hippie bold thing going on.
Yeah. Like caution to the wind kind of dude.
Yeah. He was just tuned. I'm just tuned in, like I just want to drop out and tune in,
Yeah.
And man, I mean, he did.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody, I
always imagine Honnold, his perspective is the Terminator. Where the computer shit's going on, like, and then it like, and it like goes down to the hold, and then it calculates the, And
I think you're probably not far off there. When I first,
anyway, what were you going to say? I interrupted.
The old man in me wants to like take this opportunity to tell all the young people watching, to like, don't take too many risks. But that's hypocritical, because I took so many fucking risks.
Right.
Like I still take risks, but I took some serious risks when I was younger. I mean, I still free solo, but I used to free solo a lot and free solo harder, harder routes.
Mm-hmm.
But when I watched The Alpinist, I was just like, I was just kind of the older me now is just like, I wish that he could have lived longer, and like it didn't have to be this way, blah, blah, blah. But it's just not fair. That's just not fair. I can't judge him for doing what he did. When I did risky stuff myself, not that, level, but I did plenty of risky stuff. I still do. Mm-hmm. I mean, I ride my bike around Boulder all the time. Riding your bike around here is just freaking dangerous.
Right.
People die. It seems like once a month, some cyclist is killed. And it made me realize, like, like he was just going to do what he was going to do. There's always going to be people like that who are they're just drawn to that level of risk. They have to have it. And, he had that level of risk and that level of ability, so he was going to push it and see how far he could go. And a lot of people don't make it. And I got lucky. I could have died so many different ways. I mean, I broke 2 bolts sport climbing at Index and fell from 50 feet and was stopped literally like inches from the ground.
You broke bolts?
Yeah. This was like, I broke 2 bolts. Like my worst climbing accident was breaking 2 bolts and almost decking from 50 feet. So this was like Rock and Ice did a write up on it, and like it was in Accidents North American Mountaineering, blah blah blah.
What were they like old quarter inchers, or were they poorly placed?
Put up by Greg Child and Andrew DeClerc. You know those names, I'm sure.
Oh, I know, but Greg's.
Yeah, so they put up sport routes in the 80s at Index.
Mm-hmm.
And have you ever climbed at Index?
No.
Oh man. It's so good, but that's another story. Anyway, Index is wet, right? It's a very wet crag. But I think even aside from the climate there, what Greg Child did was put in steel bolts on aluminum hangers. And over time, the 2 metals decayed. And, I was doing everything right. I was hanging on, this was a forgotten route. It was, totally dirty. I was scrubbing it up to like get it in shape to climb. Very spacey bolts. This is 1980s bolting style, early sport climbing. And I got up to the 3rd bolt and I clipped into it. It's like 50 feet off the ground. And I said, I pulled up the rope, to like get up close, and ping, and it popped. And I started falling, and the next bolt was down and to my right. And so I'm like looking at it, looking at the rope to gauge my fall. And as soon as I started to come up tight on that bolt, ping, it popped. And I hit a little like 2-foot ledge and it flipped me facing cliff out, both of my arms over my head. And I thought, well, this is it. I'm going to hit the ground. And moments before, moments after I had that thought, I like came to a screeching halt, literally like inches off the ground. And I'm like staring face to face, just like I'm looking at you now, to my belayer. And we're just looking at each other, with the widest eyes. And I was like, well, lower me, because my feet were just dangling, just inches off the ground. That's how close it was. But back to the point about risk, like I could have been killed doing that.
Right, as opposed to free soloing or something like that.
And like back to the Marc Andre thing
is he didn't die soloing.
Yeah,
he survived all that stuff. Yeah,
but somebody, maybe I read it online or somebody said, like leading alpine routes like that, excuse me, is not that much different than soloing them.
No,
like the waterfall routes.
Sure,
people don't commonly whip on that stuff, right?
Right.
So anyway.
Yeah, but that's scraping up that freaking limestone thing, because I literally have, put up roots up in those zones, like not far from where that footage was shot on that kind of rock. And it's like, it fucking breaks all the time. Yeah. And like, I don't know. It was,
that was something to see. It was definitely another level.
And we've all, like, if you've even dabbled in like mixed climbing, that feeling of like how fast like a tool skates off of something. That's the thing, like, that was in my, like, hands when I was watching that, was like that feeling of like your tool just like zings off of something so fast. And I'm like, in the way he was moving so slowly, I was like, that looks like he knows about that. Yeah. He knows about that feeling. And
it
I'm
was
like,
an amazing level of calm.
Right.
And precision,
and the skating of your crampons too, is that feeling of like zing, it just comes off.
I was almost more impressed with that solo than like the Torrey Egger solo.
No, what he was doing looked desperate, and like
it looked desperate.
We talked to Peter Mortimer about it a little bit, about filming that stuff, and it's just like I always move to that, like the guy sitting there with the camera, like just puckered, like what am I doing here? Like what am I like sort of involved in, and what am I the engine of creating?
I wish that this was necessary, but take the pain that you might carry, and don't you be afraid and hide. Turn it into love inside you now. Just spread it around. Just spread it around.
So you've got this sounds like what, like a 13, 14-year period, and it's very tempting, or it's very sort of, the siren of it is just to try to keep it up forever. And I've talked to, on this podcast, I've talked on the Run Out about like the kind of, it is a siren song, because you will be bashed against the rocks. You will be sucked down the whirlpool.
Yeah.
You have to mature. You have to the hero's journey, you have to like transform.
Yeah.
And the people I know in this climbing life that either are still hanging on to it or hung on to it too long, it becomes, not without exception, but it can easily become like this sort of tragic tale of like, what are you still doing?
Yeah,
so I'm kind of like trying to place that in my head, like this period where you're furiously going around the country and climbing everywhere and exploring crags, and then you have this like moment where you like start to realize there's something missing.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome observation, and yeah, it's one that's kind of coming full circle for me at the moment even. But like as I got better as a climber, You know, like I started in 91. I think around 97, I started to feel like I was getting good. And
it
just
wasn't
when
a week after you started, you got your gym membership, you felt like you felt like you were really good.
Yeah, right.
That's another thing that's changed. But anyway.
Yeah, totally.
let's not go back down there.
I was always into trad climbing.
Yeah.
I was into sport climbing, but I was more into multi-pitch trad climbing.
You know what I say about that? Trad climbing where you substitute scary for hard.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Well, I was on the Croft dream, you know. I was following the Croft dream, the multiple link up day, you know, like that was what I was enamored of. It was, today I went out and I climbed this, and this, and this.
Right.
And it was like, that sounded amazing to me.
Yeah.
So that's what I was always kind of chasing after, that dream of linking up routes. Yeah, around 98, I started to get injured. So, like, I started to want to prove myself athletically, and I was getting to that point where I was starting to feel like I was getting good at climbing. But right at that moment, I had a great season in 97, and then I got injured in 98, and I was injured for the next 2 years. So I lost 2 years. So, like, I had no regard. And if you're this person out there listening, well, you're probably smarter than me. But if you're not, you know, like, you're not going to be 20 forever, and you're going to have to rest. Like, I never got tired in my 20s. It was impossible to tire me out. And so I just didn't take rest days. You know, like, I think Alan Watts from Smith Rock fame, guy who developed Smith Rock.
Yeah, sure.
He climbed every day for a year or something insane like that. Have you ever heard this?
No, but
yeah,
I
and he
it.
ended up blowing out his tendons, you know, like just wrecking himself. Well, I was kind of like that, but for like trad climbing, just like constantly going out doing multiple long days. And I did that for years. And they just started to add up. Like my shoulder started to go. I ended up chipping a bone in my ankle, and then my back went out, which was like the coup de grace. And I had to have surgery on that. So like over a 2-year period, I just didn't climb very much at all. I was trying to, and it just, I just ended up being broken all the time. So like I felt like I was like denied, like I had that monkey on my back. Like the final injury was like my back. And then I had surgery at the end of 2000. Yeah, the end of 2000. And while I was recovering from surgery, I started taking banjo lessons. Just because around Western North Carolina, I heard banjo all the time, and I always liked banjo. So I started doing that. And I was into it.
So you're based out of North Carolina at this point?
Yeah, I was always kind of like, I would work summers at this camp guiding.
Okay.
And then I would save up my money, hit the road.
Pretty typical, yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of like my circuit, And then like my typical circuit would be like Hueco, Red Rocks, Yosemite, something like that.
Right.
Come back and work again. So that's when I kind of got into music.
Right, and you weren't a musician before that.
No, I was, like I said, I was a hack.
Right.
I could get around the guitar.
Right.
And I'd learn like a bunch of Dave Matthews riffs, like the intros that he did. No, I didn't know anything about music. Not really. I mean, I played like trumpet in high school, and I took a few classical lessons on piano as a kid.
Yeah,
but I didn't. I didn't remember any of that.
Yeah, but so speaking of like getting into climbing, like so often it's like, wow, you do it a few times and it's like, this is my thing, or there's this thing when it clicks and you're just like, this is my thing. Like, how did the musicianship? Because it's like, well, let me just say this: like, you're an extraordinarily talented musician.
Oh,
sitting here.
That's very generous of you.
Well, I know you're also quite humble about it, but I mean, your way around those fucking instruments. You're a composer. It's like you've taken it beyond just like noodling around a campfire by quite a distance.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah.
And I have these sort of a little bit of musical background, but I actually don't even call myself a musician. I call myself a player because I can play the guitar. I don't know that much about what I'm doing, but nevertheless. So tell me a little bit about like, because I want to kind of talk about the meshing of the two as well,
absolutely.
But like of it clicking and you going like, oh shit, like
yeah,
this is a thing.
That girl,
right?
It was that girl. She broke up with me.
Okay.
Yeah, so we...
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, it was brutal.
We were talking about this at dinner, the pain, something about like the necessity of pain for like regeneration or some shit.
Yeah, totally. That was, at the time, that was seriously painful. I lived for a year in Arches National Park. I worked at Arches.
Okay.
When I came out of back surgery. So I moved to Arches, worked as an interp ranger and resource manager for a year there. And she came with me, and she worked at Goblin Valley. And so we were there for like a year, and I like slowly got back into shape, started climbing again out there in Moab. But the whole point of that was to like maybe go to grad school, because I was trying to like figure out the next step in life, you know. And at the time, I thought maybe I wanted to work for the Access Fund. This is what I thought, because the Access Fund was kind of growing at that point, and I wanted to, you know, maybe keep my foot in climbing. And the whole time, I was like slowly starting to get more into music. You know, I took banjo lessons, and I was like starting to noodle on the guitar. I learned a little bit of bluegrass guitar, just a tiny little bit. Anyway, we moved back to Chattanooga for me to go to grad school. Her big goal was to hike the AT. And so she was prepping to do the AT that whole spring. She went off to do the AT that summer. Well, she goes off to do the AT, and I'm in grad school, and I'm going to propose to her when she gets done. And she just stopped calling me. She stopped talking to me. She just completely ghosted me while on the AT. And we've been together 3 years. And I was paying her bills. I was taking care of her cat. It was brutal. It was brutal. I was crushed.
Too much time out there walking.
Yeah.
Too much time out there walking.
She's over it. Right? And she didn't have the balls to like break up with me. Just like call me up and call it off. She couldn't do it. Anyway, through that pain, I wrote songs.
Right.
Just as a cathartic exercise, it just came out of me. Mm-hmm. And they came out so easily. They came out, just flowed right out. That pain just literally just like ejected them out. I was like, wow, how did I do that? You know, like this was a new experience to just be that creatively, I don't want to say successful, but just to just easily create was never something that I'd ever been able to do. Like I said, I tried to write, I tried to draw, I tried to take photographs. None of it worked. The songs just flowed out. And so at the time I was like, wow, I want to explore this further. And a good friend of mine was a sea kayak tour guide in the Caribbean in the wintertime. He would go down there and guide, and he got me a job doing that. And so this was the first time in my life that I just decided to not be around climbing since I had started.
A Caribbean sea kayak guide?
Yeah.
That sounds real brutal.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to get away from everything that I knew and like try to, you know, get over my heartbreak.
Right.
Even moving to Chattanooga was so I could be close to T-Wall.
Right.
You know, like I wanted to be in a grad school that was close to climbing. Anyway, we lived on this tiny little boat that was out in a bay, like paying next to no rent. And I had got a banjo and a guitar, and I took them down there, and I got these books. I was learning bluegrass. I was into bluegrass at this point. And I wrote like 20 songs while I was down there on this boat, effortlessly. They just came out, and I like fell in with this group of musicians on the island. They let me play a gig with them, and I got a free meal out of it, right?
Nice.
Like
Getting
that was
paid.
huge. That was my pay, right? Like,
right.
But I was hooked. I was like,
right.
This is amazing, you know? Like, and so I was like, at that point, I was kind of
At that gig, did you have to be like, no, ma'am, we are not going to play Margaritaville. Go sit down.
No, but there was plenty of Margaritaville going around there for sure. I used to play with this guy named Barefoot Davis.
All right.
And that was his shtick. He was like as close to a real pirate as I've ever met.
Right on.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, so
I could tell
like,
stories about that guy all night. But
yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So, yeah, that was how I really got my foot into music. I was like, wow, I'm into this. I'm like way into this. You know? Like I want to see where I can go with it. So I guess that was 2003. Mm-hmm. But I still kind of had climbing, I had like that monkey on my shoulder of like, I have something to prove that I didn't get to prove because I was stopped when I was just getting good at climbing, quote, good, whatever that means. Now it doesn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything then really, but I still kind of had a foot in climbing, like kind of seriously. And I did SAR that next year so I could go to Yosemite and do some more climbing. Quite done, trying to, quote, prove myself climbing or whatever. But, like the last episode that I listened to, or one of the last ones with Steve Schneider, he describes an event where he just felt like he had nothing left to prove. Do you remember that moment of him talking about that? He did a big wall in Patagonia solo.
The solo thing.
Yeah, and he just felt like I had nothing left to prove. And that next summer on SAR, I kind of had that moment. And I just felt like, okay, I'm good. Now I can go do music. After that season, I moved to Seattle and really went all in on music.
What was the impetus? Why Seattle? I mean, you live in this like hotbed of bluegrass.
Yeah, that's
in North Carolina.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, I'm out of here.
Yeah. Well, at the time, I still was like,
because that's how I've associated with you. Because since I've known you, that was where you lived, and
totally.
You actually did a podcast about roots music.
Yeah.
Which I enjoyed, and I know it was thankless, and it's a
funny
pain
that
in
you
the
say
ass,
that. So many people like that podcast.
I loved
and I
it.
quit doing it.
I know.
Before it even got going.
I know why you did, because it's a fucking pain in the ass.
It's hard work. I'm impressed with how you've stayed the course.
Well, I have also. It's like your free meal that you got playing that gig. Like
right.
as the Enormocast progressed, each time I was
you
about to like
meal.
Yeah, I got a little bit better meal, and it's just enough. I mean, it literally is. I mean, I don't obviously. It's like, I don't do it for the money, but I couldn't do it without it.
Sure.
Because it's just too much. I mean, I have a kid and shit. I can't just spend all this time.
Totally.
So it's like, but it's always just been enough each time. Like, all right, I'm done with this shit. And then I'm like, oh, wait, but here's a little bit more. So anyway, so I understand why you quit. I knew why you quit when you quit doing it. But I was bummed. I mean, you did what, like 11 or 12 episodes?
I don't even know.
I think so.
There's a whole
because I listened to them all.
Podcast thing, but yeah, I won't go there right at the moment. But what were you talking about? Oh, you asked why I moved to Seattle.
Yeah, the Seattle move.
Yeah,
for the bluegrass guy from North Carolina.
Well, when the SAR season ended, I was offered a job rigging ropes on a mountain in the Cascades for an adventure race. Remember those adventure races? Yeah. During that era,
not only do I remember them, I actually dated, and this is Enormocast history because she's been on the show. But I dated one of the top adventure racers of all time. Yeah.
Did she win the Eco Challenge or something?
Several of them. She almost won with an all women's team. No, the legend Rebecca Rush. She's a
I know her as a mountain biker.
Yeah. But before, that's how she got into mountain biking was adventure racing.
Well,
Primal Quest.
That was it. It was a Primal Quest.
I'm sure she was in it.
She was probably in it. Well, somebody freaking died.
Yes, she was in it.
Yeah. I thought somebody was going to die on our rig, man. It was sketch. Anyway,
she was in that race.
Yeah. That was brutal.
Oh no, it was very brutal.
Bad weather.
That kind of took her off of adventure racing.
I'm not surprised somebody died. Like what we were doing was sketchy.
Right.
And I had a good buddy of mine from the camp who lived there, and I was just taken with the city. I was like, wow, this is the coolest city I've ever been to. And so that same guy lived with a girl who owned a dog walking business, and she's like, oh, you like it? Well, you want a job? Like, I was just offered a job just like that. And I was like, really? And so I just stayed. And I fell in with this whole bluegrass scene there that was just blowing up. And that's where I met my wife, Melissa, who you met tonight.
Stand-up bass.
Yeah. And,
Upright
well, she
bass,
played
yeah.
fiddle in those days. Anyway, she's a pro-level harmony singer, but that's beside the point.
Okay.
Yeah, phenomenal singer. Yeah, so I just fell in with this amazing scene, you know, and it was really kind of blowing up at the time. Bluegrass was really taking off in Seattle around 2004.
And did like climbing just take a full back seat at this point?
At the beginning, yeah, I just didn't even, like I said, I felt washed, you know, like I had a great summer on SAR. There were no SARs basically, and I climbed my ass off.
Right.
I did, you know, I exceeded my expectations of like, you know, difficulties and felt really good about, you know, what I did that summer and was ready to
Well,
really
that's interesting to me because going back to what I said about like keeping it going is that there's two sort of traps there, and one of them is like, okay, well, I did this, so next year I'll do bigger stuff.
Yeah, totally.
I think that's the most common impetus.
You're eventually going to hit the ceiling,
right? But the other one is just to like reclaim those feelings. Like I had this great year, so I'm going to have a greater year.
I'm suffering that
you know what I mean?
now.
Yeah,
because I'm trying to get that back in my own climbing,
right.
and it's proving to be exceedingly difficult.
Yeah, cool. I have admiration for those who like keep going as long as it's positive and it's healthy and it's like it's in the right place in your life. But I also have this great admiration for someone who puts it away for a while to do something else.
Absolutely.
And I and that's why like really what I wanted to just talk to you about and why I wanted to have you on, because I'm just interested in that.
Yeah.
And
well,
I'm also
it's
like,
funny because now I'm trying to get back,
sure,
you know, where I was, and it's so hard.
Well, you're not gonna. So that's probably like your better way to
look
at it.
It's obvious I'll never be physically where I was. But.
Yeah, but I mean, you have to just change the why you climb. But I don't want to leave this thing behind, so let's not talk about that yet. And just like the fact that you recognized the satisfaction you were getting from it, you recognized a talent you had with it. Is also good, because I think that a lot of times people live lives where, you know, they don't actually have. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's a little bit of. I mean, I don't want to say courage because it makes it sound like too big a deal, but you know, you could have been this or you could have been that, and a lot of times it's easier to stay the course, and staying the course would have been going back to SAR, and
I could have,
and it was just like more of a like. Well, what if I explore this and what could happen? And the reward has been that, you know, you developed into a excellent musician that can, you know, it's like you can.
I've had a lot of lucky breaks, but yeah.
But it's also being open. I mean, lucky breaks are one thing, but it's being open to,
you're in
Seattle and this lady says you can walk dogs. Is that what your job was? She said walk
for about a year and a half. Yeah.
So I mean, dogs. A lot of people have been like, "Fuck that! I'm not gonna be a dog walker." But you said, "Yeah, I'll be a dog walker." And what came with that? You met your future wife, and you got to hang out in this great bluegrass scene because you said yes to this thing. I think that a lot of people, if you're 31 or 2 or whatever you were, or late 20s.
I was 33 at that point.
Yeah, it would have been like, "Fuck that!" That's something for teenagers.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? Like, it's okay, like to look at that as a lucky break, but it's also most people would have said no to it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm an intuitive person. I'm like extremely intuitive. You know, like I'm immediately like just sensing like this is wrong, this is right. I feel like that's helped me in my climbing a lot. You know, like if I sense the danger, I'll just like turn it off. Be like, not today.
Right.
I'm coming down. Whereas like a lot of people might just keep staying the course. I'm going up, you know, and get into trouble.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it just wasn't even a question. I mean, but here's the rub, right? Like the whole
rub.
time.
There's always a rub.
Yeah, the rub. Like basically from the years of 2012 till 2019, I was just playing music and didn't climb shit. Like hardly at all.
Oh, I know.
And
we've communicated through this time.
And it was hard, man, to not climb, you know, like it was hard. I missed it a lot. And I still, you know, even though I live in Boulder, I mean, I do miss the culture of like being in my truck. And I was just lamenting this to Melissa the other day. Like, man, I miss just like waking up at a climbing area in my truck, have nothing, like having no access to the internet, not knowing what the hell's going on, and only thinking about climbing.
Right.
That, that's all you have to think about. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And I do miss that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think, we're of the same vintage.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just talked to Niall Grimes, who is of the same vintage. He's 53.
Yeah.
And he had the same. He got married, had a kid, and he put climbing in the background, and he's in the same position where he's like rediscovering it, and like he said that he went on this trip and he was wondering like, well, is it going to be gone for me, or my relationship with these people who were my climbing buddies? But he's like, it's the same. And so it's like you just have to kind of rediscover it. But I don't see it as a rub. I just see it as like an evolution.
Well, I did an album 2018, 2019 called Nice Impression, and every track features a climber, a notable historically important climber talking about climbing, right? And that album wouldn't exist if I didn't like pine for climbing, right? That was me just like missing climbing.
Yes, all of this was me. Without me, there was no climbing. There was no strength, there was no power. People could barely do a pull-up.
People here think that Jerry can do it, and only 23 say that no, he won't. So please welcome our challengers, Jerry Moffat.
I trained really hard, and then I think about 3 weeks before I went to France, I went on a really strict diet, about 1,000 calories a day. I lost loads of weight, and my power just went through the roof. It went through the roof. I could do 147. I could hang, one arm pull up, reach the next one, hang, one arm pull up, blow, and just so from at the beginning of the winter, not being able to do it, I could do it really easily.
You made a living as a musician.
Not a good living, but I was trying.
That was it. Like, that was the dedication.
For a while, yeah. Well, I taught a lot, but
yeah. Well, that's how you make a living as a musician.
Well,
mostly.
My wife also helped me out.
Sure, but I mean, I just think I've talked to you about this over the years. It's a lifestyle and it's a skill, especially someone who plays stringed instruments. That doesn't mesh that well with climbing.
No, it's terrible.
Right, because
it's terrible.
Your hands get fucked up.
Yeah, it's bad.
Even as like a hack that I play.
No, it's bad.
I knew I could when I would pick up my guitar or play a gig, I could feel that I had climbed recently.
And I wouldn't allow myself to climb in those years because I didn't want to.
And you're playing. I mean, and you're playing like very technical stuff on a stringed instrument. Your fingers need to be limber.
Yeah.
And so and then the other thing is the lifestyle. It's like
it's terrible.
Even gigging locally in my little orbit.
It's
like
healthy.
the weekend's over. You stayed up till fucking 3:00. In the years past, it was up till 3:00 drinking and partying.
Musician lifestyle is
you ain't
a hard
gonna get
lifestyle.
up and go send your project the next day.
They're absolutely totally opposed.
Right.
I mean, when you're 20, you can drink hard and climb hard, sure. Mm-hmm. But after 30,
that's part of the deal.
You're not going to climb hard. It's just not going to happen anymore.
No.
And when you're 40, forget it.
Yeah.
And now that we're 50, really,
let alone the drinking, just the lack of sleep is enough to fuck you.
Yeah.
So hard.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I mean, I definitely did my share of partying when I was playing music, and I was probably 10 pounds heavier than I am now, and eating bad food, and I didn't sleep very well.
Well, you were also, I mean, you were at times a road musician, like doing, and it's the worst.
In 2017, I played 100 solo shows. That's just solo shows. I had other gigs, like 100 shows. It was brutal. I just totally burnt out that year. But and I did Nice Impression right after that. I just wanted to do something totally different. And you were talking about climbing and music, not jiving. Well, I've recently I've gotten serious about a classical guitar piece that I've dabbled with for a long time. And it's hard. It's legit really hard to play. It's like 514 guitar playing, for lack of a better description. I'm getting real close. I'm like 95% there on this thing. And as I'm getting closer, I'm like, should I go climb? Like, should I just not climb until I knock this thing out, yeah, I mean, it's always nagging at me. Like, if I want to play well, then I shouldn't try to climb well.
Yeah, well, that's just the thing is I think you can keep, I mean, in my opinion, it's like there are sacrifices to be made, but I mean, it's the climbing hard, it's the trying hard, it's the crimping hard, it's the twisting your hands in the cracks hard.
Even just like going out and trad climbing, like doing even moderates in elbow, it's the rope work, right?
Oh, right.
Just the rope work, pulling the ropes, all that stuff.
That's true.
That works my joints really bad.
Yeah, that's true.
Like bouldering in the gym is probably less destructive to my music than just easy trad climbing.
Right. Because of the rope work.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it works me too. Yeah.
You forget about that.
Yeah.
Coiling the ropes, pulling the ropes, jamming cracks. I've had so many injuries, like nagging injuries, like shoulder problems and thumb problems, and as a result of like trying to play music at a high level. And I think the climbing definitely didn't help. I mean, you look at my knuckles and you see they're all flared out from years of climbing. I mean, I'm not going to stop.
Right.
I've definitely feel like I've learned to balance the two, but it's always like a friend of mine is named Smith Curry, and he's a Nashville session musician, but he's also a climber.
He was on your podcast.
Yeah, he was on the podcast. He's more of an alpinist than a rock climber.
Right.
But he's a pro musician, and he summed it up well. It's like, it's kind of hard to serve two masters, like it's hard to do both really well. And I mean, I'm in no danger of doing climbing really well right now, but you still like to push your limits, right? It's still fun to see what you can do. It's a challenge. My dream has been to like go on the road and like do all these routes that I've dreamt of doing for years that I never did. And then I'll get it out of my system and I'll just be like, I'm good. But I can't get there,
Right.
Like I see like Mark Houdon, is that how you pronounce his name?
Yeah.
But he did all the routes that I want to do, right? Like Venturi Effect and like Moonlight Buttress and Tag Your Time, like these are the routes that I dream about at night, And then I just think, oh, if I do those routes, then I'll just be good. Mm-hmm. But I'm in no shape to do those routes at the moment, and who knows, I might not ever be that fit again, but
well, yeah, because it just takes those sacrifices.
It takes a lot of sacrifice.
So I have a question that I have actually been wanting to ask all night before the mics were on, and it's confused me a little bit, but you guys moved here to Boulder 2 years ago.
We did, yeah.
And I was just wondering what the deal was.
Why did we move here?
Yeah, like why? Because like again, I was like, man, this guy, he's like this North Carolina dude.
There's not a short answer to that. I mean,
does it have anything to do with the subject at hand?
No, not really.
Okay.
I mean, I would say that she wanted to move here more than I did. But we lived in a house in North Carolina that we couldn't walk to anything. Mm-hmm. Like literally, we couldn't walk around our neighborhood. There was just nowhere to walk. So that was a bummer. We didn't like that. And we wanted to try to move into Asheville where we could walk to more things. That didn't work out. And so Melissa, my wife, is she's really avid trail runner, or just runner in general. She's like super into running. We came out here, we were like, well, where could we maybe move to? And so there had to be climbing. So we're like, all right, maybe Chattanooga, maybe Seattle, maybe wherever, maybe Boulder, because we knew people here. And so we came out the summer of 2019 because I have some friends who live out here. And Melissa was just like, I love it. And I was like, I could maybe get into it, like I went bouldering at Flagstaff, there's no approach at all, I was like, this is cool. And so like we thought about it and we just decided to go for it. And I was kind of like over the music scene in Nashville. Not that there wasn't anything left for me to do, but I was just kind of like I said, I'm super burnt out on gigging. I don't ever want to play. I could play a wedding gig now, but it's been like 4 years, like it took 4 years off to or 3-ish, something like that. like super burnt. Yeah, I've played, like you're in a bluegrass band and you go play like, you could be in the most ripping bluegrass band ever, like just shredding. And you go play a wedding.
To the land of the pines.
Yes, exactly. You know exactly what I was going to say. Yes. That's all they want to hear, right? You're just like, oh, this is my life? This is what I signed up for? This is not what I want to be doing with my time. Like right when I was about to leave Asheville, I got hooked up with this guy who was like, he was going to go all in on the wedding scene. And you can make good money.
Right.
That.
Oh, no. Yeah, it's same here.
I played like
Aspen weddings.
Obama's advisor. Like her wedding. It was a freaking $1 million wedding. I shit you not.
Right.
Like you can make good money, but nobody cares about what you're doing. They just don't. They don't care. You could be amazing. You could suck. They don't care. And I just got so over it.
It's sort of the guiding of musicianship.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can climb 513, but you're not. You're climbing 5'8", bro.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, I mean, so I was kind of over like the music scene in Nashville. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I never thought I'd live in Boulder. It was never like my dream to move to Boulder or whatever. But I mean, I dig it. I've been here during the pandemic. It hasn't been, the best time to be anywhere.
Right. You guys just got in right before that.
Yep, literally a few months, and then it like crashed down.
Right.
So it's been hard to meet climbing partners.
Right.
I'm lucky that I had any. If you live in Boulder, you want to climb, hit me up. I need partners. I'm unemployed. I'm ready to go. I'm recently healed from all my injuries. So
yeah. Is your prospect pretty good for climbing?
I mean, we'll see.
Once you get that classical piece done.
I know. Yeah, it's close. It's very close.
So what does that? We'll finish with that. Like, what does finishing it mean? Do you send it once?
I want to make
you
a
send
video.
it once without blowing it.
Yeah, I'll call
Is
that.
Is it just
good.
like a V4?
Yeah, totally.
Like a V15.
Exactly.
You send it once and you never look at it again.
Exactly. Yes, I want to record a video of me doing it, and I might even release it if it's any good. If I can like really nail it, and maybe upload it, and then I'll be good with it. I mean, it's hard. It's pushing me. Yeah, I have to like really, I'm having to find new levels of technique and to like really nail it.
Right.
I've played it half-ass for years.
Right.
I've hung it.
Yeah, you've
for
dabbed.
years.
You've dabbed a few times.
Yeah, but to like really send it, it's another level. It's like Donwall.
Well, that's cool. I mean, I've appreciated that you've contributed to the run out. You've put music on there. We'll put some music on this podcast as well.
Yeah, we didn't mention that, but yeah, I mean, you've probably heard my music on like Dirtbag Diaries. Fitz has been using my music since the beginning.
Right on.
Like I met Fitz when he started it in Seattle, and we climbed a bit. I was like, "Oh, you can have some of my music."
That's
it was
cool.
Like the first stuff that I had, and he's still using the same music.
Oh, me too.
Yeah, but yeah, and like Big Up used some stuff back in the day, and
the Donwall's got a
Donwall has a song. Renan Ozturk used some stuff, and James Q. Martin used some stuff, and like some random videos that they've done. Like I haven't been very prolific in my output, so I haven't. If I put out more, I might like say, "Hey, you can keep using it."
Right.
I don't know. At this point, I'm kind of inclined to just not offer it up because I used to say, "Hey, I got some new music. You can use it. Go ahead." Now I'm just like, yeah, whatever.
Right.
If they want it, they can get in touch with me.
Somebody needs to dump you again.
Actually, I have more than enough music ready to record. I need to finish this Bach piece so I can like move on with my life, and because I have like multiple albums already written that I could record right now. The music is there.
All right, folks, thanks for listening, and thanks to Chum for doing that and lending me all that music and also contributing elsewhere on my other podcasts. All this time, finally got to meet him. Hopefully we're going to go climbing together soon as well. And once again, Chum-DM3 over there at Spotify is a good place to start. Check out his album, Nice Impressions, climbing-inspired work on there. Plus, among all the other great music is this soundtrack that he did for this climbing movie that I'd never even heard of. That's amazing. called Brave New Wild. So the film also is cool, and his soundtrack is super cool. So go check out his soundtrack, but also look for the film. It's over on Vimeo. It's by a woman named Oakley Anderson Moore, called Brave New Wild, climbing film. Really cool. I don't know how I missed it. Maybe you did too. Finally, Chum_DM3 over there at Instagram. Okay, we're going to go out on one more full track. This is Chum's latest recording. It's called Full Nelson. It's a tribute to Paul Nelson, Fayetteville, West Virginia climber who passed away very suddenly this year in his sleep of natural causes. It was a shocking blow to the community there. Chum admired him. He was a great musician himself, an incredible jazz musician. And this is Chum's tribute to the late great Paul Nelson, titled Full Nelson. And of course, check your knots.